Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Tim Jackman. I'm the Vice President of Communications with the AJGA. I have the pleasure of moderating the Q&A tonight with Kevin and Chris. I'll bring them up here in a minute, but I want to do a couple of housekeeping things real quick. The Q&A feature, which you should see in the top right of your screen if you're on a computer or you're on your phone, you can use that to submit any questions. We will have a staff member kind of moderating those. I have a few questions that we have kind of gathered ahead of time that we'll be asking, but if there's anything that you specifically would like to know, feel free to go ahead and use that Q&A feature over there. And then we'll try to get those questions in if we can. We'll try to make this last about an hour. If it's really going well, we may go a little bit longer or a little bit shorter depending on the questions that we get. So I hope you're excited. This is going to be a really great session on NIL and kind of how that applies to junior golf. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in Kevin and Chris. They've been friends with the AJGA for a while, and we're very fortunate to have them as friends, and they are a great resource for us when it comes to some of our different events. But I'll let them introduce themselves as well because they can do it better than I can. So Chris, we'll start with you. I'll bring you in, and if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of what you do and some of your experience in this landscape.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you having me. I'm really excited to be here. When the team at the AJJ reached out and invited me to come on with Kevin, I was really excited about the opportunity. I've been involved with the AJGA for, as long as I can remember. I started playing junior golf and played the AJGA, and then have been working in the sports management world for 14 years now, and have been involved in a number of different ways of contributing to events, as well as just still being a fan and watching and seeing all the young, great players come through the ranks. So thank you for having me, and excited to be here tonight.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. And now, Kevin, I'll go ahead and bring you in as well. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be a part of this. As Chris echoed, the AJGA is a special organization. You guys are the future of golf. Many of you who are on this call today. I'm probably the worst golfer on this video call. So while Chris grew up playing, I certainly did not, but excited to be a part of it. I've been working in golf on the talent representation side and the event management side for almost 20 years now, between my time at IMG and then Excel Sports Management, where I've been for the last 7 years. So when Tim and Scoop and the team asked me to join and be a part of it, and they said that there may be another agent on, I said there's only one other competitor that I'd want to join forces with here, and that's Chris Mullhaupt. Chris and I worked together for many years together back at IMG. We see each other all the time, and good friends, and excited to be here to talk a little bit about NIL and any other questions that you guys may have.
Perfect. Thank you guys very much. Yes, we're very fortunate to have you guys around with the AJJ for a long time, and certainly worked with you both closely on some of our events, the NIL event that we had, and then the Mizuho Americas Open, which are two of our really premier events, and we're very fortunate to have you guys on board with those. So we appreciate that. Why don't we always start off, Chris? Why don't you kind of start off giving us just a basic definition of name, image, and likeness, and how that relates to some young athletes?
Yeah, for sure. I think NIL's, it's a new thing in the college and amateur space, but it's not a new thing in sports marketing. Brands and companies have wanted to align themselves with athletes and celebrities and public figures for quite some time now. So I think if you're looking at it from just a basic holistic view, it's the ability for a company or a brand to associate themselves with an individual, and then as such get to use their name, image, and likeness to promote a brand, a service, or a product.
Perfect. Anything to add there, Kevin?
I would just say, as it relates to this topic and the group on the call, for the new entity to it from an amateur golf perspective or amateur sports perspective, is essentially the ability for junior golfers, collegiate golfers, in this case, to earn money, which wasn't the case, right? I think if you were to talk to a few of Chris and my clients who went to school or, were acclaimed amateur golfers over the course of the last, few years, who didn't have the opportunity to take part in this, they're probably, wishing that they were sitting in your seat coming up. So it's essentially the ability for juniors to earn money based on their reputation, their golf game, their social media followings, all the above. So yeah, exciting time to be a very talented athlete for sure.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of things floating around out there about NIL and how it can relate to young athletes, especially those before they go to college and all that sort of thing. What are some misconceptions that might be surrounding NIL when it comes to junior golfers? Chris, we'll start with you and then go to Kevin.
Some misconceptions. I don't know exactly to give you a specific one in that regard, but what I would say is when you're looking at evaluating whether you're going to do an NIL deal or not, I think it's really important to make sure that you take a step back and evaluate things from a big picture perspective. I see some mistakes that people might make. They'll make a short-term decision, or excuse me, a long-term decision on short-term facts of doing, a small opportunity here that might not make sense for them in their bigger long-term career perspective, like going to college. And so I would make sure that when you are evaluating things, make sure you're looking at it from a macroeconomic view, not just right now, what that dollar amount looks like or what that opportunity might be. I think it's really important to evaluate it from a big picture.
And I would just add, I guess, from a misconception standpoint, that maybe it's only the top golfers or the top athletes that would get big NIL deals. I think if you've got a unique story, I think if, depending on where you're from, what your interests are, do you have a social following? I think there's a lot of different things that companies are looking for. And we've seen more and more companies, and I think I would say at the beginning of NIL, I was probably a little bit surprised that that companies were looking to do this from a golf standpoint, because if you look at, let's say, college football or college basketball, it's obviously a much different audience from a numbers perspective. But I think the cool thing that we've seen is there are some brands out there who are looking to align themselves with talent that they consider to be the future. And I think there are some who are trying to be smart and, get in at the ground with some players who they think have really good upside and who could be professional golfers potentially someday. At the same time, I think there's a lot of really good amateur events, and I think that the audience for amateur golf is growing, right? I think if you look at the Augusta National Women's Amateur, I think if you look at, some of the bigger amateur events that you now see broadcast on Golf Channel, Tim, we talked a little bit about Mizuho, but there were 24 of the top juniors in the world, and hopefully a few of you on the call here, who got to participate and walk inside the ropes with Nelly and Rose and Lydia. So there are opportunities for amateur golfers to play on really big stages, and brands, certain brands certainly see the value in aligning with those talent.
For sure. You kind of building off that, Kevin, you mentioned a couple of specifics that some of these brands are looking for, of social media followings, good stories, that sort of thing. Can you build on that, kind of talk about anything else that these brands are specifically looking for, or at least you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, every company is different. I would say, I think there have been a few that we've worked with personally who, they obviously look for talent first and foremost, right? Are they holding trophies? In many cases where Chris and I are recruiting, are they contending on Saturdays and Sundays and, holding up hardware, I think is probably the first component to it. But, I think it's been, kids in general, everything, the timelines have moved up with, how juniors, are integrated. You look at some AJGA players who are receiving exemptions into PGA and LPGA tour events now, right? Like this is a pretty interesting time from a sport of golf, and it feels like it's getting younger. where there are players who are contending at really young ages and earning their PGA or LPGA tour cards or turning professional, at that point. And I think the NIL process, it's a really good entry point to learning what it's like to be a brand ambassador, learning what it's like to interact with C-level executives or clients or customers, but also, okay, I've got to do a social post for this. What does this mean? I've got to go to a commercial shoot or a content shoot and post things on social media platforms. It's there's a lot of different things that I think companies are looking for, but I think the thing, as Chris mentioned, like what people are always going to look for are the talent and the right personality and the right fit. So I think that's a good starting point.
Okay. Let's kind of go back a little bit to some of the basics. Are there specific rules or kind of regulations that these juniors should be aware of as they even contemplate this NIL kind of concept? Chris, we'll go to you on this one.
Yeah, there absolutely are rules, and I think it's a little bit different between the junior level and the collegiate level. The one thing I would say, especially at the college level, is whatever university you're at, you have a compliance department, and so it's a best place to start is with the compliance department at a university that you're at. They're the ones that'll walk you through the steps and make sure you're doing everything the appropriate way. It's not quite as regulated at the junior level. It's still a little bit more unregulated. And so it's a little bit more like professional golf is, where, your agent can walk you through and bring you opportunities. But the one thing you've got to be careful of, and what most people on the call tonight should think about, is when you do a deal at the junior level, how that deal needs to be handled once you transition into becoming an NCAA golfer, because there's a compliance component that you want to make sure that you follow strictly.
Yeah.
And I would just add on top of that, like what we've seen, there are also some regulations from a high school or state athletic association. Like every state is different. So the difference even from junior to college, you've got to be pretty buttoned up with what you're doing and have people. We've been really fortunate on the Excel side that we've got a full NIL department with attorneys who know all the ins and outs of what is permissible. And I think, as Chris mentioned, it's, you might think you're doing a good deal when you're 15 or 16 years old that, you might look back on in a few years and wish that you wouldn't have done. So I think you've got to be smart, certainly from a regulatory standpoint, to make sure that you're not putting, your amateur status in jeopardy by any means, or your ability to be recruited or go, get a scholarship to go play at the next level. But you also need to be smart about the types of deals that you're going to accept.
And I'll add on to Kevin's point. I think not only from a junior and college level, also if there's any international players on the phone that are coming over to play college golf in America, the NIL component from an immigration standpoint is something that we've had quite a bit of experience going through. And like Kevin and his firm, we work with our attorneys in-house that help navigate this situation and help walk our clients through what they can and can't do. But international players have a different set of rules that they must follow and how they can do NIL partnerships and what territories in the world they're allowed to do them in. And so it's all based on their immigration status. And so that's something to keep in mind as you're evaluating them too.
Yeah, it certainly seems like there's quite a bit of things to navigate there. We got a couple questions about college, so we'll get into that in a second. But I wanted real quick, when do you feel like it's right or appropriate for these juniors to start looking into possibly getting an agent or at least someone to kind of help them navigate these waters? Go ahead, Kevin.
I wanted Chris to fire away on that.
I'm happy to take that one if you need me to, Kev.
Yeah, all right, go for it, and then I'll give you my opinion on it. We may have different opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, two things. I'll answer that in two ways. Is one, Kevin touched on earlier that everything is becoming younger and younger in today's world. And so when I first came into the business about 14 years ago, we at management companies, we're not really recruiting players until they got into college. And it was more so towards the end of their college careers that we were really targeting them. I think at this point in time, if we were to go to NCAAs and look at the top seniors and juniors, they're already going to be spoken for from a management perspective. So the age is coming down, and I think it is starting to be something that management firms and brands are looking at the junior level. And so to your question on when should juniors start, looking at it, I'm a big believer in letting your clubs do the talking. I think that at the end of the day, the agents and the brands should be coming to the players, not the other way around. And I think if you're having the results, like Kevin said, holding trophies on Sunday, you're going to be getting approached. And I think when you are, that's when you need to start navigating it. But I would say to your question, Tim, I wouldn't be seeking out those types of things. I would let them come to you because your results do the talking. And what I tell most of my clients, good golf takes care of everything. And that's kind of a mentality that we operate under is, you want to prove you can hold the trophies on Sunday, and then all the good stuff comes along with it.
Chris nailed it. And we're pretty much on the same page there. Like, it definitely has gotten younger. To his point about, what it used to be like, we'd be able to tell, I feel like on the LPGA, there've certainly been a fair share of really good players who have turned professional on the earlier side of things. On the men's side, you used to be able to wait until, start recruiting them, meeting their parents, talking to their coaches, really getting a sense of who they are as human beings, but also getting a sense of who they are as players. And you could develop that over a few years, and then 6 months before it was time to turn professional, you could give your pitch as to why you thought you were the right management firm for them. I think from an agency standpoint, we've certainly needed to move that up. It's been nice to develop relationships at the junior golf level and then see how it's progressed. Certainly as players have entered kind of the next level, whether that's on the collegiate side or for some who have turned professional on the early side. But yeah, I think it's very much a player by player basis, right? Everybody comes from different backgrounds. Some, may not be pressed to try and capitalize on NIL opportunities because they want to focus on golf. Some may come from different backgrounds where, and let's face it, like playing junior golf and traveling, around the country is not inexpensive either. So I think that I think you've got to view this in your own in each of their own family dynamics. Talk to the people, whether that's on the AJGA side, whether you've got coaches or advisors, and certainly from a parental standpoint. So, but yeah, I agree with Chris as far as, you go and play good golf, it's going to take care of itself. And those opportunities, whether it's on the agency side or the equipment or apparel or corporate side, they're going to follow suit.
So do you feel like for the most part, you should kind of wait till people seek you out based off of what you're doing? Is that sort of kind of aligned? We had a question specifically about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are plenty of people who will be there to offer you guidance. I think you're going to find out, pretty quickly based on, a variety of factors who may or may not be interested in, representing you at certain ages, right? I think if you were to look at, and I'll just use past examples. If you were to look at Lydia Ko when she was 13 or 14 years old, every management agency was in line to try and represent her. And it wasn't just because she was a fantastic, golfer, but she was going and playing in LPGA events and competing and contending and ultimately winning as an amateur. You look at Lexi Thompson, you look at, the Korda sisters. You've got a pretty good sense of who can compete at the highest level and how that game will translate. But as for everybody who's on the line here, like, your games are also going to be evolving. Your bodies are going to be evolving. You're going to be, the difference between when you're 14 years old and then when you're, 17 or 18 years old and get to college versus the time you're 21 or 22 and you're potentially graduating or turning pro. Like, a lot can change in 5 to 8 year window. And I think the right thing is to not rush into anything. Be smart, develop relationships, and figure out who are the people that you trust that are going to be the right resources to help you navigate the many interesting things that come along. Not just NIL, but what else goes on in your life, how you make big decisions. All of those things are important to figure out to get the right team around you.
The one thing I'll also add, Tim, is everyone kind of has their own process, and like Kevin mentioned, at the end of the day, your results are going to dictate everything. But at the same time, I wouldn't be discouraged if you might not be having the results today, but you believe they may happen later down the road. There's a really good quote that's always resonated to me that Nelly always says, and she always tells people it's a marathon, not a sprint, and everybody's journey is different. So just because you might not be getting calls from an agent or a sports, equipment company when you're 16, 17 years old, doesn't mean you're not going to get them down the road. I would always just kind of keep your blinders on, work on your process, develop, work hard, and don't pay attention to what outside noise is doing. The best advice I can give to a young athlete, not just a golfer, is run your race. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because I know it's tough. As someone that played junior golf and was a decent player and played at a college level at a pretty high level, I was not the best player on my team, and I was fortunate to be very good friends with a lot of really good players. And I was watching how much better they were and all the unbelievable things that were coming their way. And I think it's important to kind of stay grounded and just worry about yourself, because if you take care of your business and work hard, those results will come. And I just want to make sure that people don't get discouraged if you might not be seeing what's happening right now and it might be happening to one of your friends. Don't worry about it. I know a ton of players that are on tour that didn't get looked at in college, didn't do this, but they're winning major championships today. And so I think it's really important to keep that perspective, especially with young juniors, because I know it can be really hard to see what your best friend's getting or this person's doing, and it can discourage you. So don't pay attention to that stuff.
I would have recruited you, Chris.
I know you would have, Kev.
I think that's a great segue. That's a great segue into college golf. And how do you feel like NIL at this level can impact the recruiting process? And there's a couple other college kind of related questions, but how do you feel like at the junior level, NIL impacts kids and what they should be thinking about as they navigate the recruiting process, which obviously can also be kind of complicated?
I'll talk a bit about the college process, because I think it's a bit more complicated than it used to be, and there's more information coming out. It seems like on a weekly basis, right? There was a House settlement issue that came about last week that essentially separates between what each university, or at least from a Power 4, Power 5 conference university, is basically a hard cap on what they can put towards students. A lot of that's going to go to football and basketball. A very small, if any, portion of that would go to golf, but there are still these groups of boosters, essentially called collectives, that have the ability to partner with athletes and to drive value and cash into potential athletes' pockets. So it is becoming more and more challenging. I would say you have to lean on the coaches when the time is right and when they're allowed to reach out in that timing window. These are all questions you should be asking them, as far as, hey, what does that look like for the golf program at your university? How involved do the collectives get from a golf perspective, right? There may be an incredibly wealthy booster who loves golf and who has supported that program, and maybe they've got something allocated specifically for those players. So I think there's those two sides to it, which is the school, there's the school side where you're trying to figure out where you're going to go and if there's any potential benefits that could come beyond your scholarship, beyond the facilities, all of those things. I have always said to any of the players that I've worked with is you've got to go to the place where you think will help you become the best golfer, right? And give you the best support system around to get to, if your goal is to get to the PGA Tour or the LPGA Tour, what's the best place to do that? And the best place isn't always the one that's going to give you the most money to do it. Everybody's got to make their decisions to, figure out what that is. But it's becoming more and more complicated for sure. And there are many questions that you need to ask as you're going through that process.
I'll add to your original question, Tim, about how's the process changed. It's changing drastically, especially on the men's side. I've seen it firsthand already, where some of these junior golfers are signing with management firms, and the management firms are effectively negotiating their college, scholarships or relationships with the collective. As somebody that is a diehard golfer and a kind of have a little bit more of an old school mentality, I don't know if that is the most comforting thing to see. But at the end of the day, that's the way the industry is going, and it's shifting in that direction. What I would say to I 100% agree with Kevin in the sense that you need to pick a place that it's going to be an environment that's going to help you thrive, not only from a golf perspective, but also as a personal perspective. Where are you going to be at your most comfortable and happy, and where are you going to grow as a player and an individual? There's a great video I came across on social media a little while ago, and it was an interview from Cooper Manning, one of Eli and Peyton's brother, whose son is the quarterback at the University of Texas. And he was asked about, how NIL influenced their decision for his son to go to the University of Texas. And his answer was brilliant. He basically said, we evaluated the college decision based on if he was making $0. And obviously, to Kevin's point earlier, there's always, everyone's circumstances are a little different. And so everyone has, I respect everyone's decision. Obviously the Manning family comes from a little bit different of a scenario than most people, but I still think that that's a really good, sound reference to use when you're deciding your college decision is, would I go to this place if I was making no money? Is this the place that I'm going to be happy? Am I going to become a better golfer here? Is this coach going to develop me? Those are the questions I would ask myself. Or if I had a child that was going to be a college athlete, I would look at it without the lens of a financial component, if that's possible. And I know that's a hard thing to do, but I would really evaluate it that way. And I would encourage you to go find that video online of Cooper Manning giving his interview, because I thought he answered the question really well.
Great. Just to clarify, basically, so we're talking about different pools of money, right? When we're talking about money from the school versus like strictly NIL money that you may get from a direct sponsor, correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we had a clarifying question on that. Another question that came in was about like staying in college. Talked a little bit about other sports, potentially the players staying a little bit longer in college based on the ability to earn maybe some of this money outside of their scholarships. Is that something that you're seeing within golf? Or do you feel like that kind of hasn't affected golf too much? Chris, we'll start with you.
I think we are seeing it in golf. It's a little different on the men's than the women's side. I think on the guys' side, the introduction of PGA Tour U is a really big new component that dictates how long a player may stay in school. Because if you can come right out of college and have a PGA Tour card, that's a pretty valuable thing. And so if you have to stay in school a little longer to earn that, the LPGA Tour has implemented a program, but it's not quite the same as PGA Tour U. So I don't know if it influences the girls as much as it does on the guys' side, but that's definitely a factor that's new, that is part of this whole NIL generation. It's a new component that definitely keeps kids in school a little longer. From a dollars and cents standpoint, if I'm being honest, and Kevin may have a different opinion because he's worked with probably more college athletes than I have. I don't see the numbers in golf to be significant enough to where they're outweighing what they're making at the professional level. Whereas in football and basketball, that might be the case where there's a couple NCAA athletes that are making more than they would make at the professional level. So they may stay in school from a financial component. To me, I don't see it at the college level where the financials are more advantageous to stay in school than to turn pro.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim, I am in agreement with that, with what Chris said. Other sports, I mean, we represent Caitlin Clark. I've been lucky, I worked with, so I've had a few clients now who have gone from kind of the NIL era to the professional side, and I can speak a little bit to it, mainly on the women's side of the game. So I work with Rose Zhang, and Rose, started at Stanford as a freshman when NIL was first instituted, right? And she didn't jump into anything right at the outset. She didn't even sign with us or sign with an agency until, she had her feet underneath her and had a good sense of how college was and how it was going to go. And then we were able to work with her to capitalize on that over, the year and a half, 2 years that she was playing actively at Stanford. And what I liked about that was, we were able to go and do some partnerships for her with Callaway, with Adidas, with Beats by Dre, with a few others where, these were companies who saw the long-term value of partnering with Rose, but also being along for the journey, so that when it was time to turn professional, they already knew who she was. She already knew who they were. And so it was a very easy transition when on May 26th, she wins the NCAA championship, and then the next week tees it up in the Mizuho and, holds the trophy on Sunday. So it was been, I would say that it's been fun to be a part of that process and trying to hopefully do that the right way and help these athletes, navigate their careers on that front. I think, to Chris, what he just talked about in the last question, we represent Arch Manning. Arch has only played a few snaps for, the University of Texas right now. And it'll be interesting to see how he plays this year, but I guarantee you he's going to make, a lot of money being down there, having the last name that he does and being the starting quarterback for the University of Texas. And whether or not he comes and brings them into the college football playoff this year and contends for a championship or not, he probably will have the opportunity to turn professional, and he'll have the backup option to, go get his degree and earn a ton of money while doing it. So I think we've started to see people going back for their junior years, their senior years, because they're taking advantage of this era that they're in. Maybe they would have been a second round draft pick or a third round draft pick, but instead they're going to go back to school, make more money than they would have, and then maybe the next year they're a first round draft pick. So we've definitely started to see that. I would say on the college side, what Chris mentioned with PGA Tour U and the LEAP program on the LPGA side, we're hopefully going to see that here shortly with Lottie. So Lottie's one of our clients, and she's the #1 amateur in the world on the women's side. And we'll see it with Jackson Koiven on the men's side, who we also represent. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Like, Jackson already has his card, but looks like he's going to be going back to school for at least one more season. Meanwhile, if Lottie earns 2 more points, she's very likely to turn professional and go. So we'll see how it goes this summer. But it's an interesting dynamic, and I would say, similar to what I said at the beginning of the conversation, like, this is the best time, to ever be a really talented golfer, because the opportunities, if you can get there, are going to be pretty lucrative.
Right. If you see in the chat, everyone watching, Justin, I believe, just posted a link to that Cooper Manning interview, so you can access that link there in the chat after we're done here. Specifically about working with coaches, I think I probably know the answer to this question, but we got this one. That's a conversation that these juniors should have with the college coaches as they're being recruited, correct? What possible other avenues of money may there be or otherwise during that recruiting process, correct? They should have that conversation with their potential coaches.
I certainly would.
For sure. I think, the that's the time and the place is at the beginning, is have a conversation, ask any questions that are on your mind. I think that's the one thing I would tell anyone that's meeting with a coach or a school that you may be attending is ask anything that's on your mind. I mean, if the coach can't answer it, then that might not be the place that you want to go to.
Great. Are there specific things or concerns that there might be that could affect these juniors' abilities to get into college admissions, playing college golf, just specific things that they should be looking out for, concerns that you may have seen or that you know of as they're going through this process of getting potentially NIL money before they even go into college or start that recruiting process?
I mean, I would say, doing it the right way, but I would also say that, just like the recruiting process has started earlier on the agency side, the same thing's happening on the coaching side. The same thing's happening. Like, people are watching you and how you handle yourself, whether that's with, the people you associate yourself, your team around you, what you're doing on social media, like those things matter. And, I think the whole point of NIL is for people to, I hate talking about a personal brand, but it is the truth, right? Like the things that you do, are what defines you, and whatever, the association that people have with you, like it's going to be known before you walk onto campus. So I would just, number one, you have to be compliant. So you need to understand some of those things that we talked about with, the regulatory issues. But I think you also need to just be, you need to realize, like, I think there's plenty of things. You see it, like tomorrow night's the NBA draft. I guarantee you at some point somebody's going to pull up a tweet from one of these guys from 10 years ago and be like, it happens every year. You see it. So I would just say you need to be really smart. You need to start thinking, longer term with everything that you do. And that's evaluating NIL partnerships as well.
Building off of some of those, what are some red flags I think that you would immediately call out if these juniors are approached by individuals who are looking to maybe work with them on an NIL basis?
I mean, from my perspective, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually probably is. And sometimes, if you don't know the individual that's approaching you, seek some advice. And that's like we said earlier. Let the opportunities come to you, and then when they do, that's the time to say, hey, I've been approached, I need some help. Whether that's your golf professional, your college coach, your a family attorney, ask for advice, and usually you can get pointed in the right direction and get some unsolicited advice where the person doesn't have a vested interest in it. Because I would say there are some things that are red flags out there. You've heard of stories where, people sign up for things that they don't know what they're signing up for, and that those things can linger well into their professional career that people are still dealing with today. And so you want to avoid those situations. So asking for advice is the first thing I would probably do.
Yeah, I think, the good thing about the industry that we're in from a golf perspective is there are plenty of reputable agents and agencies who are out there. I don't think there are too many shady characters who are, trying to, make a short-term buck and do things like that. And I think you just need to be really smart. Like, there are going to be opportunities that come your way, especially if you have a unique story to tell and you've got the talent to go to the next level. I think you need to be really smart, have those conversations that Chris mentioned. A lot of the players who are on this will have known some of these players who have now gone through the process from junior to college to the pros. Like, these are people that you're friends with, and you've been at AJGA invitationals and full field events at, and played on team events with. Like, ask them how the process has been for them. Talk to them about, who they've trusted or mistakes that they've made, right? Because nobody is an expert in this space, and everything is happening. Like, there are still some deals that come through that may look great, and then we start going through the process with this brand and we realize it's not what we thought it was. And it could be social deliverables, and it could be, things that end up taking away from, the main thing, which is trying to be a really good golfer. So, I think Chris and I, we do a good job of kind of keeping the antennas up and kind of filtering through some things that may not be the right thing. But it's not always easy to do that if you get approached by somebody or something, with an opportunity. So you've got to do due diligence across the board.
What about raising money outside of kind of the NIL space, whether that's, you've got you got family or friends or like a local business that maybe just wants to donate to you as a junior golfer and help you along in your journey. Is there any advice you'd have on how to kind of handle some of that stuff, or any pitfalls that you kind of see in that realm?
I mean, from my perspective, I would just make sure there's no strings attached. That's the most important one. Obviously, if there's someone in your local community that wants to help you, and that's a very generous offer, by all means, absolutely consider it. But make sure just know what you're getting yourself into. And again, even if it is, a fellow member at your golf club that you play at, I would still get some outside counsel to just help walk you through it and make sure you're signing up for something that you fully understand.
Do you think that I guess we had a question here about like the larger companies, organizations such as, Excel and Wasswerman versus like a smaller, very smaller group of individuals from a representation standpoint? I'll give you a little bit of a platform here. What's the draw of using like a large organization versus maybe one that's a little bit smaller?
I mean, I can speak to this firsthand. I mean, my career, I started just like Kevin. I spent almost 10 years working for IMG, which was a large company. I left IMG and I started my own boutique agency by myself. I had 5 clients, 3 on the PGA Tour and 2 on the LPGA Tour. And so I spent a really long time at a massive organization, and then I also did it at a boutique level, and I learned a couple valuable things along the way. And I think being at a firm that definitely has a little horsepower is very advantageous for not only my clients but also for myself. And so when the opportunity came up for me to join Wasswerman, it was something that I evaluated and I looked at, and I realized really quickly that this would be a good opportunity for not only myself but for my clients. And that's kind of the way I do my business. Is I'm a client first mentality. Everything I do has to be client facing and client first. And so when we evaluated it, I wanted to make sure that this was the right fit. And what I can tell you is the way we operate is we are a larger firm. We have a ton of resources. We've got offices all over the world. But I will say that we operate as a kind of a small boutique firm within the confines of a big firm. And I think Kevin is going to say something similar along those lines, because I know that he and I do a lot of business together and we know each other's work environment. We operate within our golf practice as a small firm, but we have all these wonderful resources that a large global company has. So I think there are a couple really good firms out there that you can kind of get the best of both worlds. What I can tell you from having been at a large firm and then doing it on my own, if you have a really special and talented client, you need a little more horsepower than just one small boutique firm. And I think that's what's really important. And I think if you go and look up and down the official World Golf Rankings on both the LPGA Tour and the PGA Tour, most of the top players are going to be within the first 2 or 3 different firms that we all work for, because we have the capabilities and the resources to really tap into things that others don't have access to.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I would have answered first, because I would have said what Chris said. That being said, it comes down to the person. Like it comes down to the team that you've got around you. I think the agent client relationship is so personal. And Chris and I can speak to it, right? Like he's known, how long have you known the Cordas now?
20 plus years.
Like you're intimately involved in every dynamic of what they do. Yes, your job is to help them um, achieve their goals on the golf course, and get to the level that you want them to get to, and that they have dreams of getting to. Um, but it's so much more beyond that, right? It's more than just doing deals for your players. There's going to be highs and lows. It's the game of golf is a funny one, and you could be playing great one week, and you can be down in the dumps the next week. And I think if you've got somebody and a team around you that is there by your side, that you trust, and that you've got the confidence in, and that is has your best interests at heart, you've got to find those people, because they become more than agents. They become friends and confidants and therapists and caddies and whatever else you need on a daily basis. Like Chris and I wear many different hats, and sometimes we wear many different hats, on the same day. And that's the beauty and the challenge of what we do, but it's also what we love. So I think, you've got to find the right people around you. Obviously, you want to have the reputation behind them to deliver. And I think you can, pretty much tell that when you start to look at different players and different agencies of, who's happy. Where have you seen, sponsorships? Where have you seen them play? How have you seen them handle themselves, both in the public eye and on social, however it looks like. The team behind them is an important and critical one. You've got to take the time to properly evaluate those relationships, the people who are out there, the company values for who they work for. And I think it's really, really important to make sure that you get the right person around you.
And I would almost add too that the sport of golf, or at least the individual sports for the most part, are the management teams and the agents are a little bit different than team sports in a sense. And I don't represent any team sport athletes, but I find that it's from having experience dealing with them, it's a little bit more transactional on the team sports basis. Whereas in golf, to Kevin's point, we're a manager and an agent. We're pretty much an integral part of their lives. And my management style is I view my clients as my family. And I think some of them, at least hopefully some of them, view me as part of their family, or an extension for that matter, because we spend so much time around them. We communicate with them on such a regular basis. And you're not only doing just the deals, but you're also helping coordinate logistics. And to Kevin's point, you play psychologist, you help coordinate all kinds of different things that we're really, really part of their lives, and they're really part of our lives for that matter too. I mean, my family is also very involved with my clients and their family. And that's the kind of word that I try to use around my management style is family. I think we're really involved with everyone, and they all we lean on each other for a lot of things.
That's awesome. I know in working with both of you on different events and seeing that, it is very much does come across that way too. So I think that's a great benefit there. I'm sure that a lot of the deals are different. I want to get to some social media questions here in a second, but I know that a lot of the deals are probably different, but is there like a typical structure or an example structure of how an NIL deal might be worked with a junior golfer that you could give an example of? That I had that question about 3-4 times actually in the Q&A.
Yeah, I think Chris and I, neither of us went to law school, but we're pretty well versed on the legal side of what to look for and what the structure of a deal looks like. From a junior golf perspective, there aren't really restrictions for a typical golf endorsement, right? You've got your body, and you've got your front of headwear and your sides of headwear. You've got your apparel, you've got your equipment, and your golf bag. There's inventory there from a commercial standpoint that is essentially real estate, right? That you can put logos on, and but it's not simply as most deals are not as simple as a logo slap. Most of them will include services, and that could be production days. It could be content shoots. Or commercial shoots. Actually, we've got a fun one that we can send through to the group that involved clients for both Chris and I. But if you were watching the U.S. Open last month, and you've been paying attention, there, Ernst and Young is a great example, right? So Mega Gagne is one of my clients on the NIL side, and obviously Nelly is one of Chris's clients. And they partnered with Nelly, Mega, Ricky Fowler, and Ernie Els. And so Mega's got EY on the front of her hat, Nelly's got EY on her yardage book. And it was really cool because, if you look at that and it's like one of these does not belong. Mega's in a national commercial with, three legends of the game. And it's really cool to see that there's an opportunity like that out there. If you go and do things the right way. And Mega did a great job of, introducing herself to the right people. Chris and I dealt with the same gentleman on the EY side that was looking to expand into golf. And it turned into a great opportunity. And now all of a sudden, Mega, while she's had an amazing junior career and has done great things, is in a national television commercial that's airing, the weekend of Father's Day, while these guys are going down the stretch, at Oakmont. So, I think the logo exposure, commercial shoots, social media content, because you can go to each, both Nelly and Mega's Instagram pages and you can go see that commercial. But that's part of it, right? They're contracted to do that. And I think those are the things you should be on the lookout for when NIL opportunities come your way.
From a social media standpoint, we got a few questions about that too. How important is social media to these NIL deals and to these junior golfers when it comes to marketing themselves?
I mean, I think from my perspective, social media is pretty much the first thing anybody will look at online when they hear your name. And so it's almost like your cover page, or it's, the front of your book, so to speak. And so you want to make sure that what you're putting online tells the appropriate story and is, you're watching what you post. Like what Kevin mentioned earlier, the NBA draft's going to come out and people are going to pull something up from years ago that might not be the best look. And so being mindful of what you're posting, how you're commenting, what you're doing is something that everyone should be aware of. And I get it. I mean, we were all high school kids and, fortunately social media wasn't around when I was in high school. But I think these are things that now that NIL has been introduced to the sports world, and if you're an elite athlete that wants to have this career path, you need to now be mindful of it, and you need to watch what you're posting. You need to use social media to your benefit, not to your detriment. And I think it's something that is important. Like you said, it's the first thing people are going to look at when they, research who you are.
Do you feel that, or where do you feel like the balance is between being, personable and authentic and everything on social media and doing potentially some of these obligations that you may contractually have with some of this sponsored content and that sort of thing on some of these social media channels? Do you feel like there's a good way to balance that?
It's tough depending on the player, right? Like I've got a few who are probably more social savvy than others, who maybe are more private and don't want to necessarily post every week. And then I think you can go and just look, especially on the golf side, where sometimes you just see, you go to somebody's profile and it's it's just a bunch of sponsored content. But I can also see it be a really good a differentiator for you, right? Like you look at before Max Homa was, winning on the PGA Tour, like he was super active on Twitter and he was roasting people's swings, and he kind of became that guy before he became, a winner on the tour and had, built up a following and done a few cool things. Like one of the clients on the Wasswerman side that Chris and his team work with is Michael Kim, who I think has done an amazing job on, Twitter and just being like, all right, hey, listen, it's a rain delay. Like, what questions you got for me? Or I'm at the airport. So every person is different, and if you become I think the big thing is authenticity. Like, I think people would see through it and call it BS if Max and Michael weren't just normal people and fun and engaging and interactive. And so I think there's got to be a balance there. I deal with that with a few of my clients for sure, where it's like, oh God, we got to do another thing. And it's like, well, listen, find the balance. Put something up from last weekend so that it doesn't feel like you're hitting somebody over the head with, sponsored content. But I also think that's part of, if that is truly, a pain point for you, don't do the deal. Right? Like there's certain things that maybe non-starters from the company side or non-starters from the player side. And if you can't marry those and match them up, like if you're not comfortable with every single piece of deliverables from a deal standpoint, you shouldn't do it. And I think that's how we typically advise them or advise our clients when, these things come through. It's like, all right, hey, listen, there's a few things that you may not love in here, but there's a few things that you might really like, and some of those things can be determined by, fee or time or, travel. Like there's so many different things because, as we've probably learned, more over the last, 2 decades of, you may think a deal looks really good and then you get into it and it's like, man, this is more of a pain than we thought it was going to be. And, you learn lessons along the way for sure, but you also know what to look out for.
Yeah, being authentic is the most, I completely agree with Kevin that's the most vital part of social media. And to your point on how do you balance it, it's really hard. One of the things that we do is for a lot of the clients that do have a more heavier load on the social side from a deliverable standpoint, we manage a social media calendar for them. And so we try to the best of our abilities, control how many sponsored posts are going out. We're never going to do multiple sponsored posts in a week. Certainly aren't going to be posting multiple times in one day. And so we just manage the calendar. And so when a partner reaches out and says, hey, we have something we would like a client to post, we'll automatically check the calendar and say, okay, we can't do it this week because we already have stuff coordinated then. We can do it in 10 days from now. And so it's just a balance because you want to keep it authentic. And to Kevin's point, I don't think it's a great look when a player's page is just covered with sponsored posts.
Do you encourage, I know you mentioned kind of, that was my next question about, was kind of a social calendar for some of your clients. Would you encourage these junior golfers to manage their own social media? I know a number of juniors, their parents may handle it, just to kind of build an account and take it off the player, or would you have any advice for a player kind of thinking about that?
How mature are your kids? I think there's plenty of stuff that I probably would have posted when I was 14 years old where I'm like, man, what an idiot. So I don't know. I think it comes down to you got to think about long term. And there's probably some stuff that I would have done with my friends, or who knows what a TikTok trend is going to look like 4 years from now, right? Like you could look back and cringe. So at the same time, like, I don't know, nothing's all that serious. Social media in general is somewhat of a cesspool, right? So, manage it the way that is you, but know that there are people looking at it. And I think that's the only thing, I think there's probably plenty of things that people could go back and look at, from when Instagram started, 12, 15 years ago, however long it was. Be like, man, I can't believe I posted with that, or I can't believe I used that filter, or whatever it is. Like, you change as you grow, certainly from the ages of 14 to 17 and 14 to 22 and from 22 to 40, right? Like, I think you just need to think about that, because at this point, like, people's entire lives are documented, right? Chris and I have both have, young kids, and that's a terrifying thing for us to think about. I think about my two girls on the other side of this, and I've got, a 5-year-old who is like, pretending to do vlogs, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be so bad. So anyway, I would manage it accordingly, like you would manage, your child. But I would also, like, the one thing that I wouldn't do for any parents who are here is not pay attention to it. Like you have to, because that's part of it. And all it takes is one bad thing, and it could be your child might be one of the top juniors who, and EY, for example, is looking at, and they may see something and it's like, oh, that's not the right person, that's not the right fit. So I think you just got to be smart. You got to be vigilant.
For sure. I completely agree with what Kevin said.
Just a couple more questions here. One, do you have any, how should parents be involved kind of in this whole NIL process with their kids? Obviously, the juniors are the ones, or the face of it, if you will, but how should the parents be involved, or your advice to kind of parents?
I mean, again, it kind of goes back to the social media when everything's on a little bit of a case by case basis. So everyone's circumstances are a little different. At the junior golf level, majority of the kids are probably going to be minors that are under the age of 18. And so anything that they're technically doing, entering into any agreements, are going to need to have some parental counsel or support. So I would definitely say that having a parent or a parental guardian involved in anything that a player might be signing or getting into is critical. Not to say that the parent needs to control the whole situation. It's great to allow the child to have a little bit of freedom of, learning the process and getting acclimated with being an adult. But if you're a junior golfer and you're under the age of 18, you definitely need some adult supervision and entering into these relationships and agreements, from my perspective.
And I would just add that we know we're going to end up dealing with the parent or the guardian or whoever is going to have influence on the player's life. We know that we're going to be dealing with them at the next level. I think you can get a really good sense of who the junior is by who their parents are as well. And I think, certainly parents, it's no different than, having an eye on, who your kids are, who your kids are hanging out with, or what their teachers are like. Like, you're going to want to have that relationship from an agency perspective too. So, I would expect, I would put it this way. I don't know that there are any players that I've gone to directly from a junior standpoint without first, talking to a parent or a coach or somebody that's involved in that player's life. And I think that's probably the way that it should be, especially when we're talking about minors and teenagers.
Sure. Kind of the last question, I want to give you both the opportunity to just kind of give your best piece of advice, or your just kind of final thoughts on what these juniors should be thinking when it comes to NIL, just kind of wrapping everything up, and your best words that you could have for these junior golfers. So, Kevin, if you want to start, and then we'll have Chris give his thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, my best advice that I could give is try and be the best golfer that you can be. I think the opportunities that are there for kids these days, across the board, is they're incredible. I gave that example about Mega, but I've got dozens of others that we can give, to talk about, what the game of golf can provide, to not just over the course of their junior career, their collegiate career, or even professional career, like what the game of golf can provide over the course of your life. Like, you're in a really, really good and lucky position if you're on this chat. Like, this means you've done a great job of, playing really, really good golf against the best players in the world, or raising your children to be incredible talents. If you go and you do that, and you do it at a really high level, the opportunities are going to come to you. And I think if you surround yourself with good people and you make smart decisions, the there are many lucrative things that are going to come to you, but I think you're going to be able to learn a lot from this game and the people that you go through and on this journey with. So I would do whatever you can to try and, in many circumstances, while we're talking about all the great things from an NIL perspective, try and block out as much of that as you can, because if you go and take care of business and you're going to be ranked really high and you're going to be playing in, big time events and on, great platforms, those opportunities are going to come to you. And if you treat people the right way, and do things in the right manner, there's nothing but a great opportunity in front of you.
Yep. I mean, I'm going to answer it similarly to Kevin as well. Like I've said a couple times already, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Run your own race and let your clubs do your talking. The rest of it, don't even pay attention to, because if you do those things and just focus on the things that you can control and play really good golf, the rest will take care of itself. I wouldn't, the other thing I would keep in mind too is, looking at the deals that Kevin and I have done for a lot of our clients over the, Kevin's 20 plus year career and I'm 14 going on 15. We've done some unbelievably cool deals for our clients. Some of them are really, really big. Those deals, I can tell you, have all taken place later on in the careers. And so I would definitely keep that in mind as you're evaluating NIL and junior golf in college. Yes, those things are important. And yes, it's great to take advantage of opportunities that may be presented to you that can help you along in the way. But at the end of the day, if you really play really good golf and are going to believe you're going to be one of the best players in the world, chances are whatever deal you do at the junior golf level or even the amateur golf level in college, it's going to be so insignificant in the grand scheme of your career that you're going to look back on it 5-6 years down the road after you've been a pro and you actually have real legitimate deals. You're going to go, what was I so bent out of shape for when I was 17 years old and I was signing a blah, blah, blah ball, shoe, glove deal or something? Though I wouldn't get caught up in it. I would just, focus on your process and let your clubs do the talking, because good golf takes care of everything.
And I would say the deals that, we're all going to celebrate and that are all great for the player, they pale in comparison to the feeling of holding a trophy, right? So when Nelly wins at the Chevron, Chris isn't thinking about, the Goldman Sachs deal or the Nike deal. He's jumping into the pond with Nelly to celebrate, right? And when Lydia wins at St. Andrews, I'm not, slapping her, on the shoulder and saying, hey, think about the bonus that you just got from, Rolex. No, we're celebrating and taking photos on the Swilken Bridge. And like, those are the things over the course of your careers that you should be striving for. Those are, legendary players that we're talking about, but those are really special, intimate moments that they'll have with them for the rest of their lives. And those are the ones that you should be striving for.
And the last thing I'll add, what Kevin said, something that triggered in my mind, the best players that I've worked with, the ones that people all recognize their names on both the PGA Tour and the LPGA Tour, they, in my opinion, are least concerned about the commercial deals. All they want to do is focus on the golf and how they practice and how they train and what their schedule is like. And I've found that some of the players that haven't had the success on the golf course are the ones that are all bent out of shape about getting a new corporate deal and doing this and doing that. And I think that goes to show the really, really great players tune all of that stuff out, because they know if they take care of business on the golf course, all that other stuff will come. So I know we're saying the same thing over and over again, but it's just, don't worry about that stuff and play good golf and everything takes care of itself.
And I highly recommend everybody watching the YouTube video of Nelly jumping into the pond, because Chris, were you the first one in or the second one in? Either way, it was the worst jump in the history of the Dinosaur A&A Inspiration Craft Nabisco Chevron Championship.
So Kevin wanted to sign me as a swimmer after that jump.
Love it. All right. Well, I really appreciate Chris and Kevin. I thank you so much for joining us for this Q&A. I think we got a lot of great questions answered, got a lot of great information. We did record this We did record this call. I think Justin actually just posted that video in the chat, so you can go watch
There we
that.
go. Thank you, Justin. Well done.
Gosh.
So definitely, we recorded it. We'll post it on our website and our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to go back and watch it as well. We may try to also get a few of the questions that we were not able to get to and kind of get Chris and Kevin's takes on that as well and post that on our website with the video at some point later this week. So appreciate everybody tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Kev. Thanks, Tim.